right, we are back with a Monday edition of Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham. I'll be the host for today's show, and I'm going to be joined by Osceola editor Bob Ferrante, Osceola writer Nick Carlisle, who welcome to the show, Nick, your first time.
Thank you.
Thanks for we'll talk. Nick had a very, very busy weekend, as we all, but Nick had probably a nice, relaxing Sunday in the sun. We'll talk about that. Charles Fishbein, a recruiting expert, and we're going to talk a little bit about Armondo Blount and Ethan Pritchard and the decommitment of Dia Hardison. So a lot to talk about in recruiting, and then obviously with the famous and former FSU offensive lineman and college football coach Mark Salva. He's trying to find the famous person on the screen. All right, guys. Well, welcome to the show. First of all, Nick, welcome. Nick has been a part of the Osceola for the last 4 years in some capacity, but has taken on a larger role with us since football season started. So we're glad to have Nick on here. He has worked really hard to help enhance our recruiting coverage. He is the man that toughed it out at Moore Center yesterday, which we're going to ask him about that experience in that segment of the show. But we're going to start, guys, with the Florida State FSU game. FSU wins 38-20 over Duke. Obviously, we have all had a chance to rewatch at least most of the game or parts of the game. But so we want to start with the recap there. Bob, obviously you were not on first impression, so I wanted to start with you. Just what did you think after rewatching the game, and what are your top takeaways from the game coming out of on Saturday night?
I think the most deflating moment of the game was followed by the spark that got Florida State back into it. You know, that interception was followed right away by the deuce span kickoff return that was really well blocked up by Braden Fisk and some other guys. So when you have moments like these, we always talk about momentum. Does it exist? Does it not? In college football with younger athletes, we think it really does. And that was a huge moment. I felt like, again, I think we're going to kind of go through the first half issues. This team hasn't exactly gotten off to the right foot early in games, but the way it plays seemingly second quarter and then second half has just been fantastic. Another second half shutout for this Florida State defense. And yes, Jordan Travis's legs, really happy to see Jordan be calculated, be picking the right spots to run, to give Florida State another opportunity, another look for how this offense can really meet its full capabilities with him as a runner. And I think it changed up a lot of how that offense was so effective in the second half.
All right, Nick, what were your thoughts? You've had a chance to, I don't know if you had much of a chance to rewatch the game because we had you pretty busy on Sunday, but just your thoughts coming out of the game. Obviously, you were in the press box with us, so kind of just give us your thoughts on the game. And you've been a part of this since the start of the season, so you were with us from LSU on. So tell us a little bit about what you thought about the Duke game.
Yeah, not the greatest internet connection at Doe Campbell outside of the media Wi-Fi, but my main takeaway was, damn, that might have been the best team that Florida State has faced up so far this season. Mike Elko, I don't know if he's going to remain at Duke, but he is one heck of a football coach, and to have that team come into that environment and not only take it to Florida State early, but with the way that Leonard played basically on one ankle, I'm sure he's probably about 90%, but you could tell with some of his throws that he couldn't quite get everything that he had into it. I mean, I was really impressed with Duke, and I think that Duke is a team that probably Florida State could see again in the ACC championship game. I mean, that was my main takeaway. I know obviously this is a Florida State place, and we want to talk about Florida State, but I was more impressed with Duke than I was with Florida State initially, and then obviously the second half shutout on defense came through, and the team woke itself up a little bit. Obviously, Fabian Lovett had that empowered speech at halftime, supposedly. So we've seen Florida State play good halves, but apart from maybe Syracuse, we have yet to see this Florida State team play a full 60 minutes of really, really great football. And I don't know if everybody else agrees, but that feels like a game that probably could have gotten away from Florida State if Riley Leonard was 100% healthy.
Yeah, I think most of us agree with you. Obviously, he was a little bit different player. He was their leading rusher before he got hurt. Obviously, Jordan Waters took over as leading rusher after he played against NC State, and Riley didn't. Certainly, it could have been. I think it could have been a different game because he was not used in the run game. We saw the 14-yard scramble. Other than that, his only rushing yards were lost yardage and sack, which ultimately got him out of the game. Yeah, so I think you're right. I think it did play Florida State's advantage. Obviously, Beeline was not ready for prime time, and it really changed the outlook of their offense and what they could do. All right, Fish, what are your thoughts on the game? I know you watched yesterday. Just what your overall thoughts on the game after you had a couple days to marinate in the 38-20 win.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised. I think I picked one of the closer predictions. I think it was like 27-17. I thought Duke would give them a good game. This is not your typical Duke team. I was trying to explain that to fans on the message board, and I think they took it personal that I wasn't saying. It's not that I'm saying Florida. Listen, I think Florida State's a top 3-4 program this year in the country. I was the first one after the LSU game that said I think they may be even the top team in the country. But you're going to come up. Duke is a different football team than they've been. They're very well coached, like Nick said. That's going to be one of the tougher games they play. They're very good, and I thought Leonard going out deflated that team. I think it was a major letdown, and that's why Florida State was able to take advantage of a short field in the fourth quarter and kind of put that game away. But that score wasn't as indicative of what that game really was. And it's anytime you can win a game like that, that's the thing you want to do. Every week's kind of a playoff now in this whole system. You see these teams kind of eliminate themselves. You say, oh, there's 5 teams. I'm not really worried about that. I think by the end, there's only going to be 1 or 2 seats left on the deck of the ship. So I think FSU will be one of those.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into that a little bit later in the show. Mark, obviously, you've had a chance to rewatch the whole game. And what did you – obviously, we had our first impression show. We always say we need to watch the film, which is true. We hit a lot of hot buttons early in that show. But you had a chance now, 48 hours later, to kind of let it stew. And what are your thoughts as you have now had some time to process the game?
Yeah, I said in my keys before the game that owning the red zone, both sides of the ball was going to be a real key. And that turned out to be exactly right. I mean, the fact that Duke was moving the ball and running the ball and, pretty well. But when they got down to the red zone, it kind of bogged down a little bit. I think we stopped them, 2 times. I remember that, obviously they kicked field goals. And then the fourth down stop in the third quarter. So, that was really the difference in the game, because in between the 20s, it was tough sledding for the defense, stopping them running the ball. And look, I said on the board, I said, this team reminds me of the Harbaugh Stanford team, real physical offensive line, defensive line, playmaking quarterback, great, really good running backs. I mean, they were tough, man. They were giving FSU's defense all they wanted. But when it got down to the red zone, the field got constricted, more bodies around the ball. We're able to make some stops, and that was big. Caught a holding penalty on a blitz, got a long yardage down there. So yeah, it did what they needed to do to win the game, and shutting them out in the second half obviously was a huge deal. And, and offensively running the ball. I mean, they were putting lots of numbers around the ball. I mean, it was an 8-man box just about every time. And, Jordan running the ball, and I said this Friday night, it was – I like to think that Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins are saying, we don't need him right now. We don't need him right now. And this was a break glass in case of emergency situation with Jordan Travis. We need those legs now, and that was the case. And because those runs are just about always there, even if you do have somebody watching them, if they're flat-footed, they're not going to catch Jordan Travis, right? So
and they may not catch him either way.
Either way, exactly. And in fact, one time they did actually have it, and he zipped, and they had a stunt where the end went in and the tackle circled around to capture him on the keep, and he just juked the guy and went up the field. I think that was on that 90-yard drive, the 96-yard drive. He did that one time,
yeah.
But here's the other thing about Jordan Travis. He threw some dimes, man. That third down to Jaheim Bell on that out, that was a great throw, and it was a great catch. The throw to Keon Coleman that he caught with his thighs. That was, what a spot to put the ball. I mean, he threw some really good balls. And so bottom line is this is a flawed team, and we've said it all year. There are some things, but it's a deep team, right? We may not be elite everywhere, but we're an elite in a lot of places, and wide receiver and running back, I think, is one of them, and quarterback is definitely one of them. And I think we're, offensive line-wise, we're good. We're not, I don't know that we have any first or second-round draft choices up there, but
we
they're
will
okay.
we will if they go to the college football playoff.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, when I watch the film, I'm sitting there saying, okay, we're getting pushed around a little bit on both sides of the ball, but then, we tend to make a play. So, and that's the nature of the game for us right now. And look, we're undefeated. We're 7-0.
Yeah, well,
we're not the only ones that have these issues.
Yeah, we're going to get into undefeated teams as we move forward. But yeah, listen. As far as Jordan Travis is concerned, I think we do overlook his passing ability, particularly in this game. I think he was 26 of 37 or 27 of 36. One of those looks like it was probably a mistake by the receiver, or the receiver quit running. It could have been a completed pass, but certainly he was phenomenal. As far as his legs, obviously he had 40 to 96 yards on that drive, the 96-yard drive that really turned the game around for Florida State. And I think he ran for 68 in the second half. Now, there's a big debate about how many were design runs. I don't guess it really matters. They were runs. And trying to tackle Jordan Travis is probably trying to tackle a greased pig. It's almost impossible to do. So, listen, we saw it break out. I don't think we'll see them hit the break glass until Miami. I think that'll be the next time, but we'll talk a little bit about that too. All right, so listen, if you're watching the show and have questions, please leave your comments. We're going to try to answer as many questions as we can. But, Mark, my first question is going to be for you. This was on the message board earlier. All right, we're starting to get asked questions about Florida State's rotation on the offensive line. You're an old offensive line coach. You're an old offensive lineman. You're a little bit more liberal with this policy than I am. But they want to know why you think Florida State is rotating between 7 to 8 offensive linemen a game, and what are your thoughts on that, and why do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with load management. I mean, it wasn't too long ago when we would get one guy hurt and he's out the whole season, right? And so, and guys have a history of that. Rob Scott has a history of that. Even Darius Washington got hurt a little bit. Marty Smith is fighting, a deal that he's fought with now, I think all year probably, right? Yep. And so, to have these guys available all the time, I think it's smart to limit their snap counts. Because look, it used to be you played 11 games and you played a bowl game, a month later. Now we're playing 12 games in a schedule, and if we hit in a championship game and possibly 2 playoff games, right? So you're talking, that's a lot of games, and I think load management is a smart thing to do. Now, here's the other thing: if the drop off is not huge, then what's the downside? Right? I mean, yeah, chemistry is a thing, I guess, and that is one thing. But, the other part is that, so it's a risk benefit thing kind of thing here, right? You might lose a little chemistry, but you gain the availability of having 8 guys through the whole course of the season, which I think is much more valuable than maybe gaining a little chemistry in the course of a game. You know what I mean? Especially if the drop off is not huge, and it's not. There's not a big drop off when you put. In fact, I'd argue we're better with Darius Washington at left tackle right now. He's playing really good. I think Darius is probably one of our best 5. Every time I watch him play, he seems to do outstanding, whether he's playing center, guard, or tackle. So having all those guys available to me is, over the course of 13, 14 games is more important than a little bit of chemistry.
Now, anybody else got any thoughts on the offensive line rotation? Anybody have anything? Fish, Bob?
I mean, I'm just curious for your opinion, Mark, on who you think the best 5 is. I mean, obviously we're rotating 5 to 7 guys out. If you had your choice right now and you said, okay, there's 5 that have to play an entire 60 minutes, who would you pick?
Yeah. Right now, well, if they're all healthy, right? I like Mo at center. I like Darius, man. I think I would put Darius at somewhere, and I throw him over at right guard. Byers, Roddick, and I like, I go back between Bless and Rob Scott, but I right now, Rob, I don't think is 100%, so I'd say Bless. I think that's what I want to do.
All right, guys. So obviously the defense did a great job in the second half. Bob actually got an article about that at the Osceola.com. We're going to talk a little bit about what we've got on the site a little bit later in the show. But certainly, besides the defense, I really thought this was the Jordan Travis game we've been waiting for. Was Jordan Travis' performance versus Duke the best game of his season so far? And Mark, I know you've talked, and we talked about a lot about as a staff. The Heisman is a game, a big game or a big moment in a big game where they tend to separate themselves. But was this Jordan Travis's best game of the year? Did it get him back into the Heisman Trophy? More legitimate talk about the Heisman Trophy race, and will it be Miami before we see them break glass again? And Bob, I'll start with you.
I didn't think going into the year I would say this, but Jordan Travis had his best game against the best defense, and the best defense he's faced has been Duke by far. I mean, statistically, it's weird to see LSU at 80-ish. Clemson is much, much lower than I think any of us expected from just a caliber of defense, even though we know Clemson's got dudes out there, great linebackers, for example. But when Jordan Travis had to go to that old friend, when he had to say, okay, this is time for me to use my legs. Yes, he's been battling injuries. I think he knew this was going to hurt a little bit on Sunday and throughout the week, but that he had to do this for the team. There is a risk. I know the fan base has said, why isn't Jordan Travis running? Is it Jordan? Is it the coaches? Is it both? I think there is a danger inherently of running your quarterback maybe too much. Right. And when you have a long season like this, and Pat, we were talking about this at our morning meeting too, this season could be 14 games. It could be even more. How much wear and tear do you want on a quarterback who is mobile? But in that moment, they needed Jordan Travis to be that guy. And hey, we'll see the rest of the week. How much does he practice? Is there some load management within practice? But just for what was needed in that window Saturday night, second half, Jordan delivered. I do think it was his best performance of the year.
Yeah, and I think going into the season, Florida State was hoping with a very experienced offensive line that was brought in some transfers, including Jeremiah Byers, and the running backs they have, and a versatile athlete like Jaheim Bell. I think they were hoping they could not have to rely so much on Jordan's legs outside of these big games. But Mark, what are your thoughts on Jordan Travis' performance and how it impacts his chance for a Heisman, and really how they will use him going through the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think it was his best. I agree with Bob. It's his best performance against the best defense, statistically anyways. I think Clemson had a better plan in Death Valley. But he wasn't the Jordan that he was here, right, with his legs. So yeah, I'll say this is his best one. As far as the Heisman thing goes, man, it's a war of attrition. Caleb Smith or Williams is out. Penix had a bad day. Look, if FSU goes undefeated and is an ACC champion, he'll get invited. Now, what he looks like getting us to that point is going to determine whether, and what happens around the rest of the country is going to determine. Because I'm hearing like the McCarthy kid over at Michigan is now a guy could be a Heisman guy. I hadn't even watched him play. I have no idea. But it's going to be the best player on the best team. And if we're left standing, he has a chance. That's the bottom line.
All right, Nick, Fish, what do y'all say about Jordan's performance and his chance for the Heisman?
I think it was definitely his best performance. That was actually one of my keys to the game was, are we going to have to see, I called it a quote unquote Travis takeover. And I don't know if it necessarily qualifies as a Travis takeover, but I think that was his best game of the season. And I know a lot of fans are probably going to go and say, hey, look, that's what we've been waiting for. That's what we've been talking about. But inherently, I think it's also more of a case that this offense is so unbelievably loaded with talent that you almost come into a situation where it's like, if Jordan's running becomes that much part of an offense, you have so many weapons at tight end and wide receiver. I would imagine that you want to give all of those guys opportunity to make plays. I remember back a few years ago how there was such a lack of playmakers on these Florida State offenses that if you fast forwarded to this season and you saw all the playmakers on the field, you would want all of them to be able to shine. So it's kind of a catch-22 there, but I think this was absolutely his best game of the season. It came at the exact right time. Does this get him back in the race for the Heisman? I don't know. They throw a different quarterback up there every single week. Michigan hasn't really played anybody. Yeah, they've dominated everybody, but Michigan State is more like a junior varsity football team right now than an actual Division One.
I got a lot going on with Michigan State.
But great game by Jordan. Is he back in the Heisman conversation? Yes, maybe in the third, maybe if we're ranking him like third or fourth, but I don't know how much he really cares about that. And who's to say?
Fish.
I mean, the Heisman Award is such a hype award, and there's no hype really around Jordan. Like outside of Tallahassee, not a lot of people are talking about him, and that's tough. It's such a it comes down to he's going to have to make one of those plays in a game. You almost have to hope that the Miami game is close and it's another 4th and 14 and he throws it. Now, you don't want that as a Florida State fan to have to go through that, but selfishly, that's what it may take for him to win it, is to make a great play in a big game where it basically was a deciding factor, and that it supersedes everything what everybody else has done. Because you know how that is. I mean, how many times, and you go back all the way to Doug Flutie throwing the Hail Mary, there's always that one play. Jameis, when he basically started out the game against Pittsburgh, had a great game. He made that unbelievable play against Maryland, and then he went up to Clemson and just dominated them and put Florida State basically in the championship game right then and there. So Jordan's going to have to do something special. His stats are up there with everybody else. But, like I said, I've never seen somebody that's in the Heisman race so little hyped, and we're halfway through the season already. So he's going to have to do something spectacular for these people to take notice, in my opinion.
I agree. And listen, I think the one thing I think everybody's right about the reason they're not running him. I will say this. He is really fun to watch run the football. And so from an entertainment value standpoint, I wish they felt that comfortable to break the glass every week, but I understand why they do it. But listen, when he runs the ball, whether it's design run or scramble, I think he might be one of the best runners in all of college football. I think he is. I think we all agree. With the ball in his hand, he is just dynamic, and he's so much fun to watch. And we've always said he's a warrior. And I think, and he tried to run over somebody in the fourth quarter. I don't know if y'all saw the run on the sideline, but he was trying to run over people.
There's two games left on the schedule. I hope he runs it about 50 times each. Right,
Miami and Florida.
You got it, brother.
Yeah, but listen, so I think they do have to kind of manage him for what we've been saying, not because of how many times he runs, but because of how he runs. I mean, we're finally getting to the point where he knows the best thing for him to do for the team is slide, but it's not his natural disposition to slide. I think we all remember that from when he was first started to play. When Jordan got the ball in his hand, he tries to run with the mentality of a 230-pound tailback with the ability to elude people laterally like crazy. But anyway, yeah. So I think I agree. But he is certainly fun to watch run the ball, and I'm glad we got to see a little bit of it on Saturday night. And it came at a time when obviously Florida State needed it. All right, I didn't have this in our rundown notes, but since Bob wrote the story about it and we've all had a chance to rewatch it. Obviously, what Florida State's defense has done the last several weeks, and you got a ranked team they did it against this week. We've talked a lot this season about the ineffectiveness of the pass defense for the third straight week. They shut down somebody else's passing game. Obviously, adjusted well in the second half to the run. They gave up 144 yards in the first half of the Duke game on the ground. Obviously, less than 50 in the second half. I think they had like 78 total yards, maybe 98, but it wasn't very much. Mark, what is the difference you've seen in the run and the defense over the past week and then or the past 3 weeks? And Bob, I want you to answer the same question.
Well, I will tell you that on the back end, they seem to have a lot of the communication deals worked out. Now, let me tell you something. I will say this on the play where Leonard got hurt on the Braden Fisk face mask. There was, when you look at the end zone, there was from the back, there was a communication error. Either Bethune or Deloach were supposed to have that tight end man to man, and neither of them took him. And Deloach saw it late, but he was breaking open. If Fisk didn't grab that face mask, that was a touchdown. I will say that's the only error I've seen probably in the last 2 or 3 weeks in the back end. So they seem to have gotten that worked out. They're also playing a lot tighter. I see a lot more press, especially on the corners, and we're blitzing more. Right, so we're bringing that safety down into the box, bringing them down a lot sooner, a lot quicker, and actually pressuring, pass rushing with them. But at the same time, they're not just not all the time all out blitzes. A lot of times, we'll bring Shaheem Brown, and you'll see Jared Verts drop off in the coverage, and that was, I believe that was exactly what happened on a third down against Duke, where Leonard wanted to throw it, and he had to hold it until. He cleared that window because Verse came underneath the crosser when Shaheem Brown was coming this way. So timely blitzing by Adam Fuller has happened, because when we first started out at the beginning of the year, it was light boxes, get them down into the red zone, and boom, we'll change up there. But now we seem to be doing it more early and often, and that seems to help. And also, let me tell you something: the rotation of the defensive line is huge. We're playing 8. We got to be playing 10 guys a game on the defensive line. I mean, I'm seeing Malcolm Ray. I'm seeing, I didn't see Dennis Briggs, I don't think this week, but you're seeing Fabian Lovett. You're seeing, all the ends are rotating. Everybody's rotating, and that is going to pay dividends this week. It's going to pay dividends as we move forward, because having all those guys available, rotating in, playing fresh late in the year, it's going to really start to show up later in the year. As other teams are going to start struggling, especially with injuries and whatnot as the later the years go. And if our guys are fresh, that's a huge advantage. So to me, those were the things. And of course, I want to say, I think the linebackers have developed, right? So I think Bethune and Deloach have continued to progress, but the emergence of Lundy and even Omar Graham playing faster, not making as many, early on in the year, Omar Graham made a couple of boneheaded errors, and that he seems to have gotten that out of his system. He's playing more, and Lundy looks good too. Now he got hurt. I don't remember if I saw him come back in or not.
I don't think he did.
I don't think he did either. So all that being said, to me, that all that together, I think has really helped this defense, have some great results, and especially in the second half. Now I will say this. If you go back to the last drive of the first half, and then not the first drive of the second half, but the second drive of the second half, they still pushed us around a little bit. But, again, got in the red zone, made some stops. That was okay. That to me still is a little bit of a concern. And I think that's us trying to, again, still play with the light box a little bit. But still, you got to give Duke credit too. They were pretty good. Right.
Bob, what are your thoughts? I know you were at the press conference where Adam spoke today. Just what were your thoughts on how the defenses performed the last 3 weeks, and obviously what did Adam have to say about it today?
I think it's pretty cool. When you think about it, the Clemson game was a month ago today. Florida State has not allowed a second half offensive touchdown since Clemson a month ago. That's a pretty cool little run that this defense is on, obviously with a bye week built in there. I totally agree with Mark's point. The defensive front being healthier, rested from a load management standpoint, distributing those reps. In theory, I don't know if Mike Norvell has called this championship reps or if another coach has called it that somewhere along the line, but Mike Norvell has dug up this storyline, I think, going back to March, that championship teams have this kind of depth on the defensive line. He's referenced Georgia without mentioning Georgia a couple of times there. I think the point is, this is going to be a long haul. There's going to be injuries. They know what happened to them in October of last year with all those injuries.
Yep.
So having this just quality, and look, I know there is a little bit of a drop off when you get to a Malcolm Ray, but there's not a huge drop off when you get to a Malcolm Ray. He just has to be just really good. He maybe isn't going to be Braden Fisk good, right? But there is not a significant drop off, and I think that's
not like it was last year. We lost Fabian Lovett last year,
right?
And the whole thing fell apart. One guy,
exactly.
Right?
So I think that's the huge thing to me. Shaheem Brown does stand out more these last few games. Why is the game slowing down? The old cliche. Is there something to Shaheem playing so much better.
Yeah.
It feels like Shaheem is more impactful. He's around the ball. That diving interception is as good as a lot of catches we've seen on the offensive side of the ball all year. Let's be honest.
I just think he's confident.
Well, yeah. And I think if the one thing we learned from this Duke football team is experience does matter. They had a lot of guys that played a tremendous amount of football. It's one of the reasons they've been competitive all year. And Florida State is having, as you said, Bob, Shaheem Brown is, he's just now getting into the bulk of his playing career. And you can't discount all the lessons he's learned. And we saw that. I think Duke had their defense and starting the guys that were listed as starters or top 16 or as an 579 games, 271 starts. So yeah, experience does matter.
Are majority of them already graduates too?
Yeah,
college graduates?
I think the whole offensive line was and I think we all agree that's the best offensive line Florida State's played against all year. I mean, I think they're better than LSU, and LSU's offensive line doesn't have 2 first-round tackles. And now I think maybe LSU's tackles are better than Duke's, but across the board, I
think as a group, and when you put together scheme and just attitude and how they're coached, they're by far the best offensive line.
All right. Well, Bob, before we move on to our next topic, anything else that stood out to you in today's press conference with Mike, Alex, and JP, and obviously Adam?
I think a lot of little talking points, right? A lot of discussion about fourth down decision making, and I think we've all maybe debated which one of these have been good calls and which ones haven't. The Mike Norvell loves to go for it. It's fundamentally who he is, who he has been as a head coach going back to Memphis. He likes to roll the dice. We can say that from your own 35 or 37, whatever it is, might not be the best opportunity, but he still feels like the book and the feel and early in the game, that's the way to go. I thought it was interesting. He really stood by those decisions from Saturday night. That was among the talking points that he made today. And I think on defense, it's about sometimes I think guys who don't show up in the box score as much. There have been some people, and I don't want to call out fans. I'm just saying when you don't see numbers next to a defensive player, you wonder how much impact they have. Like Braden Fisk has been that type of guy where you look at the numbers through 7 games, it's not a wow, but what he does, the energy, the consistent just push. And again, the play against Riley Leonard, I think did change the game, even though that's a 15-yard penalty that changes the game. And he has brought that kind of energy, that work ethic. I don't remember if it was Norvell or Fuller today referencing that there's a little bit of Jermaine Johnson's storyline in the Braden Fisk storyline. This is a one-year guy who's not just coming in to play. He wants to set a tone through work ethic and what he does Sunday, Monday, Tuesday around the Moore Athletic Center. So there are some good nuggets there within those coach interviews. Kurt's got a story about the fourth down decisions, and we've got the transcripts if you kind of want to go through and see, what the various coaches said, but just a lot of good kind of big picture nuggets, not just Duke and Wake Forest specific question and answer. Yeah.
Well, listen, I think maybe the defense is taking on the personality of Braden Fisk the longer this season goes, because he is a high energy, high motor, plays extremely hard. And I think maybe the longer he's here, maybe the bigger impact he's having on the attitude of that defense on a daily basis, and obviously on this football team. All right, so guys, I got a couple of quick questions. I know Bob's trying to get available for 7 o'clock in the Mike Norvell show, so we're going to try to blow through some of this as quick as we can. But I think it's always fun to have some fun talking points with some conjecture and projection. But this is kind of I don't guess we've seen these 3 games. FSU's best win of the 2023 season so far. LSU is now ranked 15th. Duke, who is now ranked 20th, or Clemson, who is not ranked. And I think there's a lot of reasons you could pick all 3 of these games and be right. But I'll start with you, Fish. Who is the most impressive win out of those 3 as far as you're concerned?
I think LSU, just because you've watched LSU, even though their defense has struggled, they've scored on everybody. They put up a lot of points. That fourth quarter, to me, was the most impressive performance of an FSU team since the 2013 team. I really felt like I walked away from that game. I remember coming on your show and saying, hey, I think FSU may be the number one team in the country. That's how impressive that win was and their performance. The Duke's win's a nice win. And anytime you could go up to Clemson and beat them on the road where FSU doesn't have a whole lot of success, that's a big win no matter what. I don't care what their record is. Florida State's that's been a house of horrors outside of 2013 and this year. I think.
Are you changing your mind in mid-sentence? Is that what you're doing here, Fitz?
Yeah, but no, I'm taking LSU as the most impressive win.
All right, Nick, what's your most impressive win?
I have to agree with Fish, if only because I think the LSU win is the only win where there isn't really an argument for an asterisk to be put next to it. I mean, what's your asterisk for the LSU game? Harold Perkins playing outside linebacker, or inside, or Mason Smith not playing? That second half was one of the most dominant halves of football, as Fish said, that we've seen from a Florida State team in a long time. As impressive of a win as at Clemson was, it's a house of horrors. But I mean, if that kicker that Dabo didn't find on the country road somewhere didn't miss the kick, it could be a completely different story. And obviously, Riley Leonard being hurt was a huge storyline for that Duke game. And I'm not saying that Florida State was going to lose that game if Leonard was 100% healthy, but obviously that has an impact. So I think realistically, you take a look at LSU, where that game was played. The talk around the game, the atmosphere around it, and having that be the first game of the season. Usually you get better as the season goes along, and the way that Florida State played that second half, there was really no asterisk involved with it. So you have to say that LSU is the best victory.
Mark?
Yeah, it's LSU for the simple reason is that's the only one that resonates with the rest of the country. I think that LSU, if they go and beat Alabama, is it next week? Right? If they go and beat Alabama, that makes us look better. And that's really the only chance we have. Now, Duke, we can see Duke again, possibly in the championship game. And we talked about this on Friday night, Pat, if Riley Leonard plays, it'll be a totally different game if he's healthy, right? If he's 100%. So whatever result we got here is not going to apply to anything because it'll be a totally different game. We probably play offense differently knowing that he is 100% and can run. So the game will look totally different regardless of what.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. That LSU win, I mean, it really, when you beat a brand like that to start off a season, the way you did it, dominating second half, I think that really made a statement for the program. I think moving forward, unfortunately, the optics are going to be what the College Football Committee views as the biggest optically pleasing performances. I hate that that's the way it is. Once we go to a 12-team playoff, that's going to change. But it's going to be in the eyes of those voters and which games they're paying attention to, and that drives me mad. But that's
not if you're number 13. Not if you're number 13 trying to get in B12, right?
Hey man, if Thomas Castellanos keeps playing like a Heisman candidate, that's a joke. Obviously, maybe BC's going to be the best win on the schedule.
I'm going to refrain from further comment on that.
Yeah. I'm joking.
Yeah, I know. Mine was not about what you said. I was just going to extrapolate a little bit, but I'm not. All right. So poor Duke, they get no credit. The best Duke team we've seen in a long, long time, and none of us are going to pick Duke because I'm going to pick Clemson. And I think the reason I'm going to pick Clemson is because they were the standard by which the rest of the ACC was measured by. Florida State had not beat them in almost 10 years, and to beat them on the road, I think that, and listen, we talk a lot about if this happened and that happened, we can do that. We do that all the time. That's just the nature of the beast. But I do think that game probably gave it a little bit of some momentum because they had to be questioning themselves going into this game, right? Clemson just does not lose very often at home. And so I think Clemson right now, even though they're unranked, Lord knows we need them to run out the rest of the season and get back in the top 25 to help FSU's strength of schedule when the college football playoff does get together. But I will go with Clemson. So we got 4 LSUs and 1 Clemson and no Dukes. And like Mark said, we might have to eat our words later on down the road because
that's right.
They could face them again. So we will see about that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the ACC, and listen, we should call this segment "Book It or Don't" because how this conversation got started today was should we go ahead and book plane reservations and hotel rooms for Charlotte on December 2nd? So we had a nice little debate at our staff meeting, but here are the ACC standings right now. You've got Florida State at 5-0, Louisville, and this is in conference records, obviously. Louisville at 3-1, UNC at 3-1, Duke at 2-1, and Virginia Tech at 2-1. So I don't think anybody's going to say that Virginia Tech's going to be a lock. But do you think Florida State is a lock for the championship game? I'll say I'm going to make my answer really quick. Yes, I think Florida State is going to be in Charlotte, and I don't know who they're going to play. Louisville's got a kind of an – if you look at the schedule, Louisville's got Duke, Virginia Tech, Virginia at Miami. North Carolina's at Georgia Tech, home Duke, at Clemson, at NC State. Duke's at Louisville this week, so one of those two is going to have another loss this weekend. Then you've got Wake. NC State. Duke's got at Louisville, Wake, at UNC, at UVA. It still has Pitt to play. So who do you think they're going to Charlotte, and who do you think they're going to play would be my question to you guys. I'm going to go Louisville right now based on what the schedule I'm looking at. But who do you guys think? Bob, I'll start with you. Is FSU going to the ACC championship game based off the information you're seeing in front of you, and who do you think they're going to play?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Florida State's going, and I think we had kind of seen this in the summer that Louisville's schedule looked a little bit softer, not having to face Florida State or Clemson. The path there was a little bit easier. Jeff Braun with a heavy transfer portal class, and hats off to him though for the season that he's had year one at Louisville. I think the matchup I might be more curious about, I'd still have to see Florida State, North Carolina, even though they've got a really tough schedule the rest of the way. I mean, you still got to get through Duke and then go to Death Valley to face Clemson.
And then that rivalry game, they got North Carolina State in the season. Yeah, so So who do you think right now?
I think it's Louisville. Yeah.
Mark?
I don't know how good is Louisville. I mean,
that's the question.
I
think it has more to do with who they're playing, right? Than it does how. Now.
They beat Notre Dame.
They did beat Notre Dame,
right? But they lost to who? They lost to
Pitt,
right?
Well,
Yeah. So
I'm just glad Pitt got their one. I'm just glad Pitt got their one upset out of the way before we got up there.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the deal. Will they have more success against Duke's defense than we did? I don't. Duke probably won't be able to score if Leonard's not playing, right?
Yep.
So yeah, and North Carolina. I mean, if you had asked me this last week, I said no brainer. It's North Carolina, right? Then they lay that egg, and so they have any more eggs in them? I don't know. I mean,
they're North Carolina. They do this.
They do. Yeah, that's true. I mean, honestly, Duke's the one I don't want to see the most. I don't want to see those jokers again. So I'll say Louisville. Yeah.
All right, Nick.
I mean, just taking a look at the schedule here, as much as Mark doesn't want to see Duke again, but I think that'd be one hell of a game if Duke ran the table to face Florida State in the championship game. But at Louisville, at UNC, your two toughest games left on the schedule are both on the road. I mean, obviously they played well on the road against Florida State, but I think that's a tough ask, especially Louisville coming right after a tough loss against Florida State. We don't know the health of Riley Leonard. I'm tempted to call that a loss. I think, just to be different, I think Florida State will probably see North Carolina in the championship game. So to answer the primary question, yes, I think Florida State is a lock to be in the ACC championship game unless a catastrophe happens, and a catastrophe would be losing to Miami at home and then losing to either a really, really bad Wake team or a really, really bad Pitt team. So, I think you could probably book your tickets. Maybe don't purchase.
You want travel insurance? You want travel insurance or no?
Yeah, travel insurance. I mean, that's up to you. Everybody's different, but I think you could pretty comfortably book Florida State to be in the championship game. And to be honest with you, I think. North Carolina can lay some eggs. Mac Brown is good for at least one egg a year, and they might have just had it. So, if I'm betting, I think it's Florida State, North Carolina in the championship game.
Fish?
If Duke or North Carolina are in the ACC title game, how many bad calls is FSU going to get? Like, isn't the game in Charlotte? That's got to be worth at least 10 points right there. You know,
That's
I don't.
true.
There's no way FSU's not making it. I'll say it. FSU's not making the ACC title game. They'd have to have one of the worst collapses. I mean, they got to lose twice. I don't see that happening.
I'm with you.
You know, I just don't see it. Listen, and I'm usually the pessimistic one on this group. All right, so like for me to just say, listen, buy your tickets. Don't even worry about it. Put them away. They'll be fine. The only thing that may happen is you guys may lose them, or you know, a dog eats them or something. But you're going to the championship game. I'm not.
Who are they playing?
I'm like last on the list.
Who are they playing?
I still think North Carolina. They have Drake May. I know they lost last week. They've got the best quarterback. I think that Duke, if Leonard can't go, I just don't see them. Duke has too many games that I think they have a shot at losing without Leonard. They're a totally different team without him. I mean,
Yep.
You're talking about a 17-point difference among any of the teams that are worthy that they're playing. I just think Duke's out of it if Leonard can't play, and I think it'll be FSU, North Carolina.
All right, so everybody book their tickets. It's unanimous on this. On this
Book
panel.
them tickets.
Florida
Book the
State is
tickets.
going to Charlotte, baby. All right, so
Charlotte.
we're you don't
I
like
can't
the-
promise
you
they'll
don't
win
like the
that game
Queen's
because
thing? Come on,
Yeah.
you go NASCAR racing.
Oh, my God.
Go get your 5 laps in at Charlotte and go to the ball game.
the
No.
ACC will try to screw it up for FSU, not realizing they're the only shot at winning a title this year. But
By
whatever.
the way, if you have not been to the Charlotte racing school, you should really go. When we were at South Florida, we played in that bowl game up there, which is now the Duke's Mayo Bowl. I think it was the Belk Bowl when we played in it. And one of the perks you got for going to that game was you got to get the teams to Charlotte, and you got to ride in a race car for 5 laps. Everybody on the team, everybody on the staff. And boy, it is one of the neatest things you could ever do because you spend half the time thinking you're going to get thrown out of the car as it goes through the turns. It's crazy, the G-forces. But yeah, so if you're going to Charlotte, go to the Richard Petty Racing Experience or whatever the hell they call it. You'll have a good time. But book your hotels, book your airplanes, and book a Charlotte Raceway experience. So, all right, we got that going for us. All right. So, listen, let's talk a little bit about I'm gonna put this on Nick. Nick's Armageddon comment. Unbelievable upsets. We see them every week. We always say it's not going to happen to the team we follow, but we saw UNC go down to UVA this week. Washington and Oklahoma got really lucky. Kenny Dillingham decided he loves 4th downs too. went for it on 4th and 3, was a pick 6, and the game was over. All right, so I don't think any of us think that Florida State is going to. My dog's boyfriend is outside. She's going crazy. And so if you hear any of that, that's her. Murphy's got a crush on Astro, and Astro's outside with her owner right now. I got that window open. So anyway, all right. So not that Pitt or Wake Forest, because I don't think any of us think that Pitt or Wake Forest is capable of beating Florida State, but we see this happen on a regular basis in college football. Who concerns you most? I mean, we all think that Miami is going to be a battle. I mean, we think that's a game that Florida State's going to be favored in, but it's a rivalry game. You don't ever know what's going to happen. They just beat Clemson. That's going to give them some confidence. But out of Pitt or Wake Forest, who concerns you most for a letdown? And Bob, I'll start with you.
I think the answer for me has to be Wake Forest, only because those games in Winston-Salem always seem to be a little bit wacky. Yes, there's no Sam Hartman. It feels like Dave Clawson might just kind of be that coach who can figure out a scheme that is competitive, that puts Wake in a position to defeat Florida State. I'm not saying it's going to happen. That's just the one that concerns me the most.
All right. Nick?
I'm going to say Pitt, and if only because of the team that follows it. I think with the Hurricanes coming in next week, there can be a major tendency to look ahead. I don't know necessarily whether or not this Florida State has done that yet this season. I mean, a lot of people thought that with Clemson going next week, maybe Florida State overlooked Boston College a little bit. I don't know who Pitt plays this week, but going to Pitt next week, knowing that you're playing the Hurricanes next week, I think you could potentially have a letdown game. I think Wake Forest is too banged up at quarterback in order to be any real threat. So as much as I agree with Bob, that kind of similar to playing at Louisville, playing at Winston-Salem can sometimes be like, can put you on pins and needles. at least recently. But I think Pitt probably is the one that I would pick to be a bigger letdown.
Well, Wake Forest is going to put me in a sleeping bag and a pillow on Snuggy Hill. That's where I'll be on Saturday. All right, Mark, who you got? Pitt or Wake Forest?
Pitt for the exact same reason Nick talked about. And besides, with Wake Forest, like I said on Friday night, all you have to do is put on the film from last year and the year before to get this team motivated to play them, right? So they need to go ahead and take care of business with Wake. I think Pitt, they've kind of strung together a couple of wins here now. So, they may be finding a little something and then going to Pitt. I don't know how many of these guys have ever been to Pittsburgh, so that'll be a different experience, a weird experience. The weather will probably be kind of crappy, so it won't be ideal conditions. Plus, it's right before the Miami game.
All right. Fish?
Well, I watched the Pitt Wake Forest game. Pitt should have won the game. I don't know how they found a way to lose. They actually found I don't know, I forgot the kid's name. They found a quarterback that I think they'll be pretty good in the future with. He can throw the ball. I don't think Florida State Wake Forest is a close game. I honestly, the spread's -20. I could see FSU putting 50 up. That game could end up a lot like the Southern Miss game, in my opinion. Florida State's had some bad luck against them the last couple of years. I think they owe Wake Forest some payback, and I just don't think this Wake Forest team's any good. Pitt still has a decent defense. Their run game is solid, and like I said, this quarterback is good enough to give you a bad if the weather's bad or whatever, and Florida State's got to go up there a week before the Miami game. There's that. What do they call it? I forgot what they call it when a team plays another team before. But I think Pitt's just one of those games that's going to be a lot tougher for Florida State of the two.
Right. Well, I'll go with Pitt. And I'm gonna go with Pitt as the trap game if there's one out of those two for all the reasons you guys said. All right. So quickly before we get to recruiting, there was an interesting graphic that showed up on the ESPN telecast on Saturday night where they asked if there were 5 undefeated teams: Florida State, Oklahoma, Washington, Georgia, and or Michigan or Ohio State. Which of those 5 teams is going to get left out of the college football playoff? If sitting here today, and obviously this is pure just having fun, it was brought up on the ESPN telecast. Obviously, there's only 6 undefeated teams left. Who do you guys think would get left out of that playoff picture? And I'll start with you, Nick.
Oh, God damn it. You saw me react to that. I think it's Washington. I mean, I could tell you who's not going to get left out unless Georgia collapses. I mean, Georgia being an SEC school, they're going to get in. I think maybe see, this is a really interesting scenario. And it always ends up this way, that somebody always is left on the outside looking in. I think if Florida State runs the table, wins the ACC championship, you can't exclude them. Really, I think it's either going to be Washington or whoever.
Oklahoma?
Yeah, Oklahoma. Or some part of me even wants to say, like, depending on, how much the college football playoff committee values strength of schedule, whoever comes out of Michigan, Ohio State, and however bad or lopsided that victory may or may not be. But I don't think you can exclude Georgia. I don't think you can exclude FSU if they run the table and win the ACC championship. So it's got to be Oklahoma or Washington, or if one or the other blows out the other team in the Big Ten Bowl. That's probably as good.
That is the championship game in that conference, because I'm not even sure it's going to be Iowa now after they go down on a crazy bad call by the officials against Minnesota. Listen, they need to have that investigated, because that guy needs to be fired, whoever made that damn call. That was not a fair catch signal. He was basically telling his teammates where the ball was. I think that's what he was doing. All right, Bob, who you got? Who's out? I
think, honestly, the cleanest solution is for Texas to beat Oklahoma, and this thing just works its way out on its own, right? I think Nick made the argument for all these guys. Florida State, quality wins. Ohio State beats Michigan, you've got a ton of quality wins.
Yep.
Yes, Georgia does not have a competitive schedule. We have to remind, players are not making the schedule. They are winning the games on the schedule.
Yep.
I would say Washington has a really good win over Oregon. I would not want to see Washington left out under the scenario we're kind of currently presenting here on October 23rd.
Yep. We haven't even started talking about whether Alabama races to the SEC championship. You got a one-loss Alabama team and a one-loss Georgia team, which SEC, somebody's going for the SEC. We know that, even if they got one loss. So, Fish, who you got? Who's out?
Yeah, Oklahoma, it would be my team. I know a lot of people haven't watched Washington, and I know their game was close this week. I think Washington's one of the best teams. And they showed it defensively. They got a defense this week. They won with their defense. That's a very, very good football team. It was just a letdown game after they had an emotional win against Oregon. I think they're one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country. I just think it's Oklahoma. I think that FSU is one of the top 2 or 3 teams. No way Michigan or Ohio State's getting left out, or Georgia. You may as well forget that. Like, that's 100% guaranteed. The winner of the Michigan-Ohio State game is in the finals, and Georgia's definitely not getting let out. So it'll be between Oklahoma, and I don't see FSU getting let out. So Oklahoma's the one team I think stands out as far as they may get unlucky.
Mark?
Well, I think same thing. I think it would be Oklahoma, because even if Oklahoma wins their conference and they play Texas without Quinn Ewers, who now has shoulder surgery, right? So he may be out for the year. That totally changes the outcome in terms of the perception of that game if they play Texas in the championship again. So, look, here's the deal for me. Okay, if FSU goes undefeated and gets left out, then look, the ACC needs to go ahead and just write a check and let us get out of the league. That's the bottom line, right? If going undefeated in our league, and honestly, I had the same feeling about having one loss. If knock on wood, we are one of the one-loss teams, along with Alabama, along with maybe Oklahoma, Washington, any of those, and we get left out, the same kind of thing. If the perception of this league is so weak that we, one loss, having had the success we had, having hopefully beaten 2 SEC teams and winning our league, and still can't get in with one loss, say we lose to Miami, so, one loss, that's a problem. And anybody that is whatever about us being in the ACC, that just bolsters our argument right there.
All right. Well, we all think that Florida State is going, and we think Oklahoma is most likely the one not to go. All right. So before we move into recruiting, because Duke is the gift that keeps on giving, and we'll talk about that when we get to Fish Bits. But Mark, we got a question from Seminole Saturday night. I think you may already addressed it. Did anything different defensively? Did you see Florida State? The question is, did you see Florida State do anything different defensively once Leonard went out of the game? If so, what? And secondly, it looked like early in the game, FSU was getting beat on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I think we all agree that was true in the first half. Second half, obviously, it's changed. Was that scheme or depth?
That was depth. It was depth. I mean, we it's funny because, on some of the runs they hit, we stunted out of the runs, right? So we slanted one way and they ended up hitting the run in a gap that we, like Bethune, or we're doing a gap exchange and the linebacker, that's those runs where the back would hit it up and then just bounce it outside, kind of caught flat-footed on a gap exchange, or they hit it away from a stunt that we hadn't called, right? So lucky is what I'm saying. And we got stuffed on on one counter we got stuffed when they stunted into the run. And I think I can think of one. We ran a counter, and I think it was Meach got absolutely rocked by the defensive end, almost over the top of the center. That guy was crashing so hard, and so we hit it right into it, and it kind of bundled it up and made Benson, jump around. It just didn't look good, right? And so it was a little bit of luck. It was a little bit of we didn't. I think in the second half we did hit on a couple of run blitzes and a couple of schemes, and it was again. In between the 20s, they were running the ball, but when it field compressed, we got the safeties closer, guys more bodies in the box. It seemed to help a little bit. So that was that.
All right, so now let's move into recruiting, because although they played the game on October 21st, October 22nd had to feel a little bit like Christmas on Florida State's campus at the Moore Center, because they flipped the defensive end prospect Armondo Blount from Miami Central, flips from Miami to FSU, and then he reclassifies to the class of 2024, and they also landed the commitment of 4-star 2025 linebacker Ethan Pritchard after the Duke game. So, Fish, this is your time to shine, buddy. I know you like Armondo Blount. Tell us what Florida State is getting in Blount, and tell us how you think that all played out, including, and what does that reclassification do for this recruiting class, other than obviously moving it up to number 3 in the Rivals rankings?
I mean, there's one guy that goes on the message boards and he's like depressed when it comes to D-line recruiting. I won't bring his name up, but this was a huge get for Florida State. There was one play he made earlier this year that Salva would have loved. He made a tackle. The guy fumbled. He picked it up, did not lose any momentum, jumped over an offensive lineman that was on the ground and took it the distance. Big time athlete for a guy that plays on the D-line. I would say it's like, to the level of when Timmy Jernigan or the other defensive tackle from Maryland committed to them, Eddie Goldman. It's been that long since they've had a kid with this much talent on the D-line commit to them. Part of the problem is it's hard. Everybody wants these kids. He's a big-time player. He's constantly making plays for his football team this year. Florida State's getting a great player. I think I rated him the number 1 player in their 2024 class now.
Yeah, he was your number 1 defensive end in the class in the state for 2025. So obviously, you think he's the best player and that says a lot because you got Charles Lester, KJ Bolden.
No, they got a great class. Listen, when you look at their class, they basically got the number 1 player at their position at multiple positions. This kid's the number 1 D end or D tackle in the state. Then all of a sudden you got Landon Thomas, who's the number 1 tight end. They have Charles Lester, who you could argue is the number 1 corner. And then they got the safety, Bolden, who's the number 1 safety in the country. So getting the number 1 players at multiple positions, it helps you stay on top of those standings for a long time.
How does Blount compare with Bain?
Bain, the one thing is, and I watched Bain the other night, I went to the Miami game. The one thing with Bain is Bain's got an unbelievable motor. He's not as athletic as this kid, but Bain, the one thing is, and you know how that is, you just don't know when you're recruiting these kids, their motor, right, how much his will. I mean, this kid is leading Miami in sacks as a freshman, and he's not a super twitchy guy. You watch Bain, he's not a kid that just blows buys, but he reminds me of those like old school, like Virginia Tech DNs, like Corey Moore and those guys that were undersized that just irritate you the whole game. They get under you. He's constantly making plays. This kid's got more upside. And that's saying something because I think Bain is a tremendous player. If he has that same motor, and I've met the kid, but you don't know until you're coaching them if they have that in them. A lot of kids don't have that, Mark. You know that, especially now. It's so hard to get both. You either get the super talent or you get the work ethic. And if you get both, you get a superstar player, and that's what Bain is right now.
Well, let me ask you this, Fish. Florida State's at 22 high school commitments for this class. Yeah. We know they're going to hit the portal. They're going to have some portal needs at linebacker, defensive end, possibly safety, maybe even offensive line again. They're probably good at receiver. Maybe go get if you lose Bell, Coleman, and Wilson, you probably go get a transfer receiver. But who's left that you think is a definitive take from the high school ranks?
Well, Jamari Howard already just said, I think November 10th, he's going to commit. He'll be the next one that commits to Florida State. I think he's pretty much, I don't want to say a lock, but he's pretty much close to being a Seminole. He'll be number 23. And then after that, unless they could get an elite left tackle, a pass rush end, or somebody that's a difference maker at receiver like a Jeremiah Smith, I think they're done with the recruiting. I think they're in a position of strength that where you only go after the very, very best with these last 2 or 3 spots. And Jeremiah Smith, as you know, he's a difference maker at receiver. If they could get you some, who knows, there's a lot of time between now and the end of this season. You know how this works. There could be a big-time DN that we don't know about that they've been talking to. All of a sudden, a kid takes a visit that last weekend in November, December, and you get a kid that you're like, where'd this kid come from? That's what happened with the corner that time from D.C. They got him. I forgot his name, but he was on the championship team. That's what's happened with them. They're in a position of strength. I think most of the spots now you just wait for the portal to open up. And now Florida State doesn't need to take 20 portal kids. They could be very selective in who they want from the portal this year.
Yeah, listen, and we've always said your biggest recruiting tool is winning, and there's no doubt that what that has been proven as Mike has gone on this 7-0 run, and I think they're on like a 16-game winning set. Somebody can, I don't know the numbers, I'm bad at math, but obviously they finished the game on there's 13-game winning streak. They finished the game on a 6-game winning streak last year, I believe. It was either 6 or 7. Obviously that is paying dividends as they're flipping one of the most highly sought after kids in the state of Florida in Blount. All right. So they also, before Blount committed, which, Pritchett did commit on Sunday officially, because I believe it was after midnight when he made the announcement, and we started writing the story in the press box. Nick was down Nick texted and said, "Hey, he's committed. Start writing a story. I'll come back with quotes." So
red alert.
Yeah, he kept us busier than normal after a game. But what are your thoughts on Ethan Pritchett? Obviously a 4-star inside linebacker, rated as the 11th best inside linebacker in the state of in the class of 2025 by Rivals. Where do you have him ranked?
Yeah, I mean, he's basically been playing safety or in the box safety position. He will play linebacker in college. The one thing you like is he doesn't take those false steps back. He's always moving forward. He's not a super fast guy, but I think instinctual. He's got that instincts down with the linebacker position. That's what you want at linebacker. He has a chance to be a very good player. I don't think he's a superstar player, but he could come in. He reminds me very similar, if you turn on his film, of Kalen DeLoach. I think he's be a good fit to just fit into that position once DeLoach leaves. I think he's very similar in his skill set and the way he plays on the way you watch him on film. He looks very similar to DeLoach when he was coming out of high school.
Yeah, and I think most Florida State fans would be fine with nailing down another Kalen DeLoach and getting him in that defense. So obviously he's a guy that can run and hit. Anybody else that's on your radar for 2024, 2025 that you think Florida State may be close to, or guys that you think need to be paid attention to?
Yeah, I think the Marcelin kid, Ezekiel Marcelin kid out of Miami Central, now that Blount's committed, he's a 2025 kid. He's the best linebacker, or one of the top linebackers in the state for 25. Listen, you turn on the film, he's just a difference maker. Florida State fans have had a history of great linebackers. This looks like one of those guys that's different. When you turn on the film, he's always downhill. He's always making plays behind the line of scrimmage. You see that number 17 flying around the field when you turn on the film. I think he'd be a great addition. He's a guy that I'd watch out for now that Blount has committed to Florida State.
All right. So, Nick, we're going to bring you in here a little bit. We're going to term it Sundays at the Moore Center, and Nick is getting indoctrinated into the game that is hurry up and wait when you're waiting for unofficial and official visitors to leave campus. But Nick, you were down there, I think, from about noon to probably 7 o'clock on
6-7 hours, yeah,
Sunday, and it's not. It can be frustrating at times. There's no doubt. But you were down there for Blount. You were down there for Pritchett. You saw a lot of guys. Who'd you see? What was said? And what do you think of the experience? And you can be honest.
Well, I mean, the experience as a whole, I was joking at the meeting this morning. It was like going through the 5 stages of grief. There was denial, then anger, then somewhere along the end or the line of things came acceptance. You know, he'll come out when he gets there. At the Moore on Sunday, it was mostly a bunch of committed kids that had stayed the night. Cromenhawk came through, Charles Lester came through, KJ Bolden was there as well. And I imagine what they were talking about is they were talking about potentially joining the team for bowl practice. I know Cromenhawk said something on Saturday night when I talked to him. And talking with Lester, he said roughly the same thing. Lester's state high school game is on the 10th. He said that he's going to be early enrolling, so I imagine that he's going to play the state game, and then he's going to be with the team after he officially signs. So that was everybody on Sunday, apart from the guy that committed and everybody's so hyped about, Armondo was very, very businesslike. He was very tired. Because he's been going since basically he got into town. So if you happen to watch the interview with him that's going around, and you go and you say, gosh, this kid just doesn't look very excited, for his commitment. It wasn't that at all. He was just tired and he had a plane to catch. His mom was there, and she was super excited, and she said, oh man, it's a relief to kind of have everything off the shoulders.
Well, and listen, these are always big decisions, and probably never bigger now when you have to throw the NIL component into recruiting and all of that. But yeah, Nick, we'd like to thank you because listen, we've all done it. We've all done it. We'll all be doing it more, but we've only got
Nick,
one.
I really appreciate you doing it, man. Thanks.
No, hey, I'm very happy to be a part of it, and I'm glad something fruitful came out of it.
Yeah. Well, hey, your time was well spent. There's no doubt about that, and we do appreciate you doing it. We've done it before. I'll do it again, and we'll probably be comboing it for the Miami game, I would believe.
I'm sure it's going to be just as hectic
on Sunday, because that is the last home game that we'll have any really big time prospects in. I don't think you'll see many for North Alabama, but certainly appreciate it. It is an exercise in patience, and it is. But listen, it's fun to sit around and talk with the guys from the other sites and kind of break down what they think of the kids and where they are with the recruiting. That's the time you get to talk off the record with those guys. And it's kind of fun, and also sometimes you get to hang out and talk with some of the coaches as they're coming in and out of the building. But all right, so. Nick, we certainly appreciate that. That was great breaking news on Pritchett, Blount, and certainly appreciate you're doing that. And obviously, Nick has stories on both those kids' commitments at the Osceola.com. Obviously, if you're watching the show, I'd like you to subscribe to the Osceola YouTube page. All you got to do is hit subscribe. You can also get notifications, which will alert you to when we're doing live shows, and also let you know we got practice reports that practice video we put on there every week. Obviously, Mike, Alex, Adam, and JP's press conference videos are on there today. But we do have a lot of things going on there on the Osceola this week. If you're not an Osceola subscriber, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com and check us out. But just some of what we've got going on this week. Bob's already got his story on the defense in the last 3 games that they've had. We've got Norvell, the coordinator's press conferences. We will have coverage of Dave Clausen's press conference tomorrow. He meets with the media in Winston-Salem tomorrow. We'll have our daily practice reports, our weight preview. We'll have player and opponent features throughout the week. Nick's already got his recruiting roundup story. We'll probably have a takeaway Tuesday from me tomorrow at some point. And then Fish will have his fish bits on the message boards. And we might have a special guest or two on Reeling Them In later in the week. We will let you know. We hope that we will save that. We'll tease that later, but we are expecting to have a couple of recruits on the show here as we move forward in the next couple of weeks. Guys, Mark, Fish, Nick, any parting thoughts as we get ready to close it off here? Everybody good?
I'm pretty set and straight. Unless you got anything else to ask.
No, I think we've probably used a lot of the questions. I know a lot of people want to watch the Mike Norvell show, so we'll go ahead and sign off here. We do appreciate you guys joining us for our Seminole Sidelines YouTube show. You can also watch this on Twitter and our Facebook page. So I hope you follow us there. I hope you will check out theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. Subscribe to our service. We've got some free content up. Other content you do have to be a subscriber for, but please check us out. And as always, Mark, after the Florida State goes 7-0 and number 4 in the nation, get ready to get awake. I'll let you sign us off for this week.
Go Noles. Scalp them.